Hi everyone, PV here, and welcome to today's YouTube video. And today we're going to finalize our review of Innistrad Crimson Vow. We've already done white, blue, black, red, green in the past few weeks, so you can look at the videos on the description. And today we're going to do artifacts, multicolored, and land. Actually, we're going to start with multicolored, but multicolored, artifact, and land, which will conclude the set. And if you've missed the previous ones, the way this works is I'm going to talk about every single card in alphabetical order, and explain where I think they can be played, how good I think they can be, and stuff like that. The focus of this review will be constructed, so I'm going to talk about mostly standard and historic, but I'll mention if the card is particularly interesting in a different format. But since it is a constructive focus review, I'm going to speed through the bad cards, the limited cards pretty quickly. So let's start with multicolored. The first one is Ancient Lumberknot. I think this is mostly a limited card, right? It's an interesting archetype in limited, but I can't. It's just too expensive for constructed. I think you would have to have a very specific deck for this to be good. I don't think that deck exists. Angie, Maid of Dishonor. I think this card is very strong. This might be the best vampire in the set, the best card for vampire decks. The vampires have a problem in that a lot of them cost 4. The same way that, all the spirits cost 3, a lot of the vampires cost 4. You have Vampiric Dragon, you have the Purveyor, you have Soaring, you have the 1/3 that flips, you have Angie. I think Angie is the best of them. You play, you got a blood token, and then you sack the blood token. It's kind of like a Siege Rhino, right? It drains for 2. Obviously, they can kill it, so you're not getting anything. But if they don't kill it, then it just beats any stalled battlefield at all, right? Because you get a blood token, you play another creature that's another blood token, but you can sack the creature and the blood token, so you're draining for 6 already. So it's very, very good at racing in general, because you're just draining, and it just beats any stalled board, right? So I think this card is quite strong in the Vampires deck, especially if it has a blood theme, right? It also produces a bunch of blood tokens regardless, right? One it enters play and one every turn after that. And 4/5 being a 4/5 means it blocks Essica's Chariot. It doesn't like to Demon Bolt. So I think this card is definitely one to pay attention to in the Vampires deck. Bloodtide Harvester. I think this is a good card, right? This won't make or break the Vampire deck, but you will be playing this in the Vampire deck if you have the blood tokens, right? I think Angie is already enough to justify it. It's a 2-mana 3/2, which is okay. It can sack itself to kill something early or late because it scales, and you get a blood token. So I think this card is just good. It's not as strong as Angie, but I think it is going to be played in every vampire deck as well. Eruth, Tormented Prophet. This card is cool if you have stuff like, Song of Creation, where you're just trying to go off in a turn. It is probably... it might even be good enough just to play for value, right? Because you're exiling 2 cards, and one of them is hopefully going to be a land, so you just play it, and then you get to play the other one as well. It is not as good with reactive stuff, right? So if you exile, say, 2 counter spells, or remove a spell and a counter spell, you might not get to play them at all. So this is probably not good enough, but it's an interesting card. I think it's worth keeping in mind. Grolnok the Omnivore. I think this is mostly an EDH card, for frog decks and stuff. I don't think it's quite good enough for constructed. Halana and Alina Partners. This one I think is quite good, right? Because you just play this turn 4 and already pump something immediately for 2. So it's permanent +2/+2. Unfortunately, it doesn't work on itself, right? So you can't just pump it and pump it more and more and more. But you pump something else. The haste will not do anything in the first turn, usually. But then next turn, you get to play something, give it +2, and give it haste again. And now we're already at +4, right? So +2 power from the Halana and Alina. So I think this is a lot of power for 4 mana. Basically, you're doing a lot of extra damage by giving your stuff haste and by pumping them forever. And if you just have one thing, you just keep pumping it, right? It's a double Luminarch Aspirant, basically. So I think this card is really strong in general. And it has reach, which is usually not the most relevant, but it might be. There's a 3/1 flying vampire that can't block and it attacks and you make a blood token. Well, this is first strike reach, right? They can't even attack if you have this. Or if they just have Epiphany, right? Sometimes you have just overwhelming battlefield and the opponent just goes Iteration, Epiphany, and then Epiphany again and they kill you with enough tokens. And this is at least a blocker, right? So it's going to stop one of these flying attackers per turn, which may or may not be enough to win, usually is not going to be good enough. But in some games, it might be the difference between winning and losing. The fact that this can actually block the 1/1 tokens from Epiphany. Right, so I think this card is quite strong, and not even mentioning if you pump it. Right, if you pump it, then you also get to pump your other stuff more, because it scales with its power. So if you have Ranger class, for example, you're going to put a counter here, which you translate into, because you're getting 3 counters the following turn. So I think this card is quite strong. Kaisa Geist Hunter. I think if you're really in the market for a Spectral Procession, you can play this. You know, it's a one-off Spectral Procession. But overall, it's just not good enough. Like, it gives everything Death Touch, but then you put a counter on a creature token you control. I don't see where you would play this, unless you're trying to combo it with that Death Touch Lord. Right? I don't think this is going to be very good. Markov Purifier. I think it's pretty reliable to trigger this. Like, you can gain life every turn, but having to pay 2 to draw a card is, I don't think, good enough. I think I would much rather play, the other white vampire that when you play a 2-power creature, you draw a card. That's much, much better than this, right? And I don't see myself playing this. Markov Waltzer. This is just too expensive. Even if you get the pumps, right, it's effectively a 3/3 haste for 4. It's just not good enough. Aldrich Bloodcursed. I don't think this is good at all. Old Rustein? This card is a bit weird. It does get to trigger every turn, so you're getting an effect every turn, and you're also milling every turn, which some decks might be interested in. I don't think I would play this in any deck that exists, right? I don't think it's good enough for that, but it is a reasonable card, right? If you just play it and you get a 1, people have played Skullport Merchant, for example, right? And this is, sometimes it's going to be a Skullport Merchant, sometimes you're going to get a token, sometimes you're going to get a blood token, but it just keeps going off and off and off. Is that better than the sack ability from the Skullport Merchant and the guaranteeing the treasure token, which is likely the best of these effects? I don't know. I think the Merchant is still going to be better, but it's not outside the realm of possibility that this is good enough to see play. Olivia Crimson Bride. I think this card is pretty cool and interesting, but it is not a vampire card, right? It might deceive you into thinking you want to play this into vampires, in a vampires deck, because it is a vampire, it has a vampire clause, but I think this is mostly a combo card to reanimate stuff and win in 1 or 2 turns. I think that is the general idea of it. Now, I don't know what you are reanimating, but this is mostly what I want to be doing, right? I don't want to pay 6 for a fair card that I'm going to attack with. And I just want to do something incredible if I'm paying 6 mana for it. Which means, building your deck around this card rather than just slotting it into a vampire deck. I think it might be good enough. It might surprise me, right? If people are playing a bunch of sweepers, for example, like say you play a bunch of stuff, they play burn down the house, kill everything. This is your follow-up. You play this attack, bring something back. Like, that can be pretty strong, I think. But I think I'm mostly looking at a combo and just bringing something incredible back. Seaguardian Paladin, 4 mana, too much for constructed. Skull Scab. I would be into this card if it worked off of tokens. But as it is, it doesn't. And the thing I'm most interested in exploiting is Decayed Zombies, right? I want like Jadar or Jader and stuff. And this doesn't work with them. So you might have a deck that has like Eye Twitch and Shambling Ghast, and this is what you sacrifice. And then, you just go turn 1, 1/1, Shambling Ghast, turn 2, this, sack it, you get 2 2/2s. It's not that bad, but is it good? Probably not, right? So I'm probably not interested in this. But we'll see. Dorn's First of the Angels. The problem with this card is that it is yet another 3 mana human, right? And again, we've talked about this before. There's so many good 3s in white specifically, but potentially also in green, that it's fighting with a lot of stuff. And for this to be better than the existing 3-drops, you have to be going super wide. Like, compare this to Adeline, for example. Adeline, you're getting a token every turn, like starting on turn 1. And these you have to cast spells. And Adeline is just so much bigger than this by itself. Alright, so this is just not as good as Adeline, unless you're really going off, which I don't think you will anytime soon. Vile Spawn Spider. This card is actually interesting. It is just a 2 mana, 2/3 reach that's milling cards, and that might give you some value. Right, and then eventually at some point you pay 4, you sacrifice it, and you make, 5 or 6 1/1s, and sometimes 10 1/1s, depending on how long the game's gone. I don't think realistically it's going to do anything, right? It's just not strong enough, but it's pretty cool. Wandering Mind. This card is good. The problem with it is obviously that it wants spells, right? But it's a creature. So how are we gonna conciliate these two things, right? It's not gonna be super easy, especially if you want to play multiples of this. You also want other creatures, right? You can't play. I don't think you want to play this as your only creature because then the 2/1 it's not gonna do that much. But I think it's an interesting card. Like 6 is a lot of cards that it's digging, and as a creature, it can turn on some stuff that you might be able to blink it, or you might even bounce it, right? You can Fading Hope it in a matchup that doesn't have any targets and stuff. So I think it has interesting applications. But I don't know exactly where I would play this, right? Obviously, the blue-red spells deck in Standard right now are possible homes. But I don't know if you're getting enough out of the 2/1 body to justify playing this over just a regular card drawing spell, basically, that you can then copy with Galvanic Iteration, right? Imagine having Galvanic Iteration in this and not being able to copy it, and if you had Behold the Multiverse, you'd be able to. It's a bit of a bummer. Brian Comber, I think this is just a limited card for the most part. Child of the Pack also strikes me as a limited card. I mean, if you can reliably play this flipped, then it can actually be good, right? Because it's a 4-mana 5/5 trample that pumps everything else. But at this point, I might be more interested in playing like Arlene, right, than this card. I don't think it's quite there yet. Dorothea, Vengeful Victim. I thought this card was pretty reasonable when I saw it. I like it less and less as the time progresses, but I still think it's a bit underrated. Like, I've seen people comparing it to, this is just a bad card than the Fist of Unicorns, but I think the reality is that it's cheaper on both counts. And like a 2-mana 4/4 flying blocker is a pretty good blocker, right? It's going to block anything on turns 2 and 3 and 4 of the game. So you do get to trade with something, or you get to attack for 4 and then do the disturb. So I don't know exactly if this is good or not. I think this is really the type of card that you have to play with to see if it's good. But I think it has some potential. Edgar, Charmed Groom. This card is pretty strong, I think. It is a bit weak in the sense that it doesn't have any abilities, right? So it is just a 4/4, which means they're not even that incentivized to kill it, right? Like a 4-mana 4/4 just doesn't cut it in today's standard format. But, if you are playing a control deck, you have sweepers, or you have other vampires that it's pumping, or you have ways to sack it, or you're just playing against a deck that was not going to go over the top of it, right? That has to fight it in combat or that will die. Then I think it can be good, because once it dies, it transforms, and then you're getting tokens, and then you're going to transform back and pump these tokens, and at that point is pretty strong. So I think this card is good. I don't know exactly where I would play it, like some sort of black-white, mid-rangey deck. It's not really a Vampires card, because Vampires is black-red, right? And I think it kind of has to be black-red. But maybe you can play 3 colors, or maybe you just put this in a control deck and have it be your finisher. Like, I think this is potentially good enough. Bruno Strunk. I think this card is super weird, but it does a bunch of different things, right? It mills and doesn't mill, but like puts stuff back, and then you can flip it. It just seems so situational and so hard to make work that I'm not really interested in it. Artifacts. The artifacts are mostly bad. Spoiler alert. Blood Servitor, limited card. Board and Windows, limited card. Ceremonial Knife, limited card. Dollhouse of Horrors. This is the one interesting one. I think, the effect is pretty powerful. It is similar to Godpharaoh's Gift, right? But it doesn't happen as quickly, but requires less setup, right? Godpharaoh's Gift, you basically needed the gate, and then you needed 6 creatures in the graveyard, then it could work. This, you just pay 5, and then next turn you use it. Or you just pay 6 and use it immediately. And the artifacts are always going to be at least 2/2s, because there's the dollhouse and then there's the artifact. Even if you play any other artifacts. And obviously they'll scale up the higher, the longer the game goes, they'll be bigger. But you're mostly trying to play this for the abilities, the same way as the Godpharaoh's Gifts. Right? For example, the Angel of Invention was the card that we used to get with Godpharaoh's Gift. And it's actually quite good here too. Right, because you just make the 2 servos, and that will pump the angel itself and stuff. So I think this card has potential. I don't know what a deck looks like with Dollhouse of Horrors, to be completely honest. Like a standard deck, I don't know. I couldn't tell you. But I think it's a card worth keeping in mind because it has potential. Honor Heirloom, just another of the 3 mana rocks, right? Not that good. Investigator's Journal. I think this is like what kind of deck wants this, right? Because you need to have creatures, but if you have creatures, then why are you trying to draw extra cards? It just doesn't compute, right? You want this, Maze Mindstorm type of effect in usually slower decks, right? Mostly control decks versus other control decks or control decks without blue. It might be good in a mono black deck, right? If you have like the Eye Twitch and the Shambling Gas and then you consider the Curtains card, maybe you can play this and get 2 tokens on it, and then it's going to draw 3 cards over the course of the game, 2 counters. Or they have a bunch of creatures too, right? But if they have a bunch of creatures too, you really need to be dealing with these creatures rather than spending mana drawing more cards. So I don't think it's good enough, but it might be a way for the black decks to draw cards that they otherwise wouldn't have. Like they have like Lothal and stuff. But the problem is that this is the type of card you want to play early, right? You want to play it early and then start using it. And then if you have, if you want to play this on turn 2, the most you get is 1 counter. So you're getting 2 cards for 6 mana is not a good deal. Lantern of the Lost. This is just another lantern, right? I think you can see play in the right situation. Wedding Invitational. I think this is mostly just limited card, but we've seen 2 mana interest play, draw card artifact seen play before, right? Even if they did nothing else effectively, so maybe this is it too, but I think it's unlikely. Foreboding Statue. When I first saw this card, I thought it was just a mana rock that turned into a 5/5, and it could actually be okay, but then I realized it's a 1/2, so it's just really not good enough, right? You can just play it and they kill it, and that's it, right? So it's a 1/2 for way too long, and it doesn't add mana immediately, so it's just not what you want. Then the lands. Obviously, the lands are all good, right? Some are more important than others. For example, Storm-Carved Coast is going to be huge, right? It's going to be good in Standard. It's going to be good in Historic. But they're all going to see play just because they're much better than the Snarls. And they can even be played in addition to the Snarls, or you can play like 2 Snarls. So you actually have better mana in enemy colors in Standard than you do in allied colors, right? Because now you have the pathways and these lands, and you can play some Snarls if you want, which you don't have access to in the allied colors. So enemy mana is better than allied mana right now. And then there is Voldaren Estate, which I think is going to be good if you have a Vampires deck, right? Just having a dual land that enters play untapped for your Vampires is pretty huge. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of good 1-drops anyway, so it doesn't matter that much, right? It would be a more important card if you had good 1-drops in both colors. Right now, you don't really. It's mostly just red. But it still lets you, use a land to cast your Vampire on turn 1, and that's pretty important. And sometimes you're just going to be creating blood tokens, right? You have 3 spare mana, you're going to create a blood token, and that can amount to something if you have Angie in your deck or other scenarios. So I think this card is going to see play if Vampire sees play. So the gold cards overall, I think, are okay. I think the deck that gains the most is Vampires, right? You get Angie, you get Bloodtide Harvester, and you get a dual land that other people don't get. So I think this is the most improved deck with the multicolored cards. But also, Helena and Alina Partners is pretty strong if you have a Gruul deck. I think this is going to see play. And then there are a bunch of cards that could or could not see play. Like Wandering Mine is okay. Olivia might be good in the right deck. Old Renstein might be good in the right deck as well. The House of Horrors is, a potential option. But I'm mostly looking at the Vampire cards. Oh, and Edgar too. I think there might be a control deck with the Edgar as a finisher somewhere. All right, but yeah, that's mostly it for the gold artifact and lens in the set. And this is going to conclude our review. So this is it for Crimson Vow. And again, I think for the most part, Crimson Vow is going to be good at upgrading existing decks, right? If you think, what are the best decks before? Well, it was Mono Green, Blue Red, and Mono White, right? Different flavors of that. And they all got stuff. Like Mono Green got a good 1-drop. Mono White got Talia, Valorous Stance, another 1-drop. Blue Red got a land, right? And some card drawing spells, some counter spells, the Hullbreak Horror as a finisher or a potential cyborg card. So the existing decks that were already good got better. And not many decks that were bad got enough better to justify that. Right? We have, some good red-green cards, werewolves and stuff, and Lana and Helena. That might be good for the green-red decks. We got Edgar, that might be good for black-white. And then we got the Vampires. The Vampires is just the new deck that I would like to try because I thought it was already pretty close. I did a video on a Vampire deck a couple weeks ago, So before this set even came out. So I thought that deck was already closed. That was a deck that I think can be pushed from like tier 2, tier 3 to tier 1 with the new cards. But other than that, I'm mostly looking at blue, red, mono, green, and mono, white as the 3 best decks. And then, you know, red, green builds and black-based builds as the next tier, which was basically exactly what we had before. Right, so not much has changed, other than that the top decks all became a little bit better, even, I think. If you like my work and want to support me a little bit more, make sure to check out my Patreon page. It's patreon.com/PVDDR, and there you can support my work and get some extra perks on top of it, such as access to an exclusive Discord server where you can ask questions, talk to me, vote on topics for the next videos, and stuff like that. And special thank you for my biggest supporters. Adam Renzi, Adam Camilleri, Clicks, Foxy, Fernando Vizeu, John Jam, Jack Hart, Joey, Calvin Peng, Kevin Masse, Lawson, Mattia Giardini, Nate, Safa Rappin, Silvia Leticia, Stu Cameron, Thomas Pokorny, Dimitri, and Willie Linton. I really appreciate the support, and I'll see you next video.